Welcome to the Empowered Podcast, episode number 88. That's 88 weeks of empowering and equipping entrepreneurs here with the Empowered Podcast. I'm your host, Ellery Wells, and I am glad you are here today. I'm glad you are going to join me for the next few minutes. I've got a really cool guest today, and I know I always say that, but I do my very best to filter some of the requests that I get and only bring you people whose message I really believe in or who have an incredible story that I want to share. And today is no different. You might have seen this guest on TV. You might have read some of his books. You might if you have seen him, you will definitely recognize his hair in the image today. So if you go to empoweredpodcast.com/88 for episode 88, you will see my guest today. I'm excited. Whenever I was connected with a previous guest, Jeff Woods connected me with this guy, and I have been looking forward to this chat, this interview ever since, and I couldn't be more excited to share it with you today. This episode is brought to you by howtostartamastermind.com. If you've listened to the show for more than this episode, you know that the power of a mastermind has the power to change your life, and it's something that I absolutely believe in. If you want to start masterminds for yourself, if you want to get your business off the ground, if you want to get your career moving in the right direction, or just to jumpstart it again, masterminds are just surrounding yourself with like-minded people so that you can share your dream and people won't look at you like you are crazy. Now, there are a few more components to that, but if you want to start a fantastic, accountability-driven mastermind, go to howtostartamastermind.com, and that program will help you get started. It's something that I have used over the last 8 to 10 years to really see some of my fantastic successes. I wouldn't say I'm at the end of the road. I wouldn't say I'm across the finish line, but I have definitely had some wonderful wins in my life, and it's all because of the program that you can get access to at howtostartamastermind.com. Thanks for tuning in to this episode. Let's go right in. Thank you for tuning in to this episode. My guest today is the host of the It's Time podcast. He just published a fantastic book that I look forward to reading called It's Time, My 360-Degree View of the UFC, and he's working on his own bobblehead collection. Today's guest is Bruce Buffer. How are you doing today, Bruce?
I'm fine, Ollie. How are you?
I am doing great. I'm excited to interview you today.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. Mutual.
So most people know you as the voice of the Octagon, the guy coming out in the stylish suit or tuxedo to announce the fighters. But before we touch on any of that, I want to ask you, what is the legacy of Bruce Buffer? What do you want to be known for?
You know, all I want to be known for is respected for what I do, what I've done, and just to been known for being a good person with everybody I've worked with. And that I've always given it my all, and I've always attacked everything I've done with a passionate fervor to, again, be the best I can be. Because, quite frankly, I believe all people are created equal. It's just about the paths that we choose. I'm not a big fan of that word celebrity or anything that places above anybody else. I like to be recognized for my ability to hopefully be the best I could be at the work that I do, whether it's announcing in the Octagon, running many of the various companies I've run, or, anything else. And that's mainly it. I mean, respect and appreciation, and I'll be a very happy guy.
Hey, that sounds good. I agree. We're all created equal, but it seems like it's a matter of what we do with what we're given, and that's an important part of the factor. So I like that you had mentioned that. I was doing some research on you. I don't always research my guests, but I knew a little bit about you. I heard you on Jeff Woods' podcast a few months ago, and I was fascinated with your background in marketing. And so, again, you're the announcer for the UFC. Your brother is also fairly famous, but your marketing brain behind all of this is really driving a lot of success for you. How did you get such genius for marketing?
It started at a very young age. I would say it even goes back to my very first lemonade stand, when I was like 8 years old, on to the point where I was delivering newspapers at 10 and working in the back of those food trucks. They're very popular today. My uncle had a service in Philadelphia, which was the biggest service, called Suburban Lunch Service. And I used to spend my summers with my brother Brian, and we would get up at 4:30 in the morning with him, make all the sandwiches, prepare the food, and then go work in those trucks, for 8 hours a day, and I'd make a big $20-25. And it just really fueled me to the fact that it was going to reach in my pocket, and I wanted something in life. I wanted to be able to pay for it. And then I started a jewelry business in high school, and I had my first corporation when I was 19. And from that point forward, I was going to college and studying business and all that goes with it, but I was basically learning at night in school what I was doing during the morning running my company in the afternoon. So I elected to stop going to college, give it a 2-year hiatus, and if I needed to go back, I would, but I always firmly believe that college is very important, but it teaches knowledge. It doesn't teach application. It doesn't teach getting out there and making it happen, except in the exercises you do in college, which is still not really 100% reality with what real life is all about. Where people are wanting to take over you, the dog-eat-dog mentality and all that goes with it. So I never went back to college.
Did you go back? You never did?
Went back.
Okay.
No.
Why?
Not that I say that that's just worked for me. I'm not saying it's going to work for everybody, but it fueled my power. But then I based it all on passion, and it wasn't until my mid-30s that I passionately found what was my calling in life.
A lot of people say that, Bruce. They all, some of the most successful, most famous, or even wealthiest people, the Zuckerbergs, the Bill Gates, the Mark Cubans, and all that, they didn't finish school, but they are advocates for education. How does that play into what your experience was?
Well, the same thing. I mean, I know Mark, and I know how tenacious he is, and basically, it's just you got to find your way. I mean, a lot of people go to school, and they, of course, you have to go to school to become an attorney, to become a doctor, to be an accountant, to be. When you choose a path like that, I mean, you need the sheepskin. You need all the learning and teaching and knowledge you can get before you go out and you begin to study your next course in life, which is application. And that's fine. It doesn't make you any worse or better than anybody else. You're trying to be the best way you can be. But entrepreneurs, which has a whole new meaning to it beyond somebody that chooses a set path, because they're willing to roll the dice and they're willing to go out there and get knocked down on the canvas and have to get back up. And when you do that in life, you've got to be passionate about what you do, in my opinion, because that way you'll fight harder to get back up and be stronger than you've ever been before, learning from what you just went through. When you first do something, shall we say, wrong, and what is judged as being wrong or what people like is not the right way, it's not that you made a mistake at that point. Okay, you had a learning experience. Now, if you do it again and the same thing happens, then you've made a mistake. You should have learned. So it's all about how you look at your life and how you treat yourself in the evolutionary process, which is a daily, ongoing thing. I just turned 58. I still wake up every morning to be able to learn something new and accomplish something new.
Awesome. You mentioned you had found your passion when you were in your 30s. Up until that point, was it just a lesson in getting knocked down and getting back up? Or what happened in your 30s that clicked for you, that gave you traction?
Well, in your 20s, you're hot to trot, and you're going to school, and you're partying, and you're thinking about, the next girl you're going to be able to date, or how your relationship's going with your girlfriend at the time. And then in your 30s, you're entering a world of a little more stability. I mean, some people start younger like I did, but you're realizing that now you need to have it all set down. You're getting married, the kids are coming. Then you're in your 40s, and people around you are starting to get divorced. And, God forbid you go through that yourself, and it creates a whole new thing. And in your 50s, people around you start dying, and your family members are getting older, and your parents are becoming your children. And there's all these different stages of life, and you need to be ready to handle them. So for me, back before I gained my passion, the big thing with me was I was all about making money. And not that I still am not. I mean, believe me, I'll always cash the paycheck. I'll be the first one to the bank to cash it. But I'm not about the paycheck. Now, that could be a little easier to say because I'm a little more comfortable in life now, but it's not that life can't change like it could for anybody, even if I was just, working in a restaurant, with all respect, as a waiter, and having to find another job if I lost that job. The doors of life open and close all the time. But I became less money-minded that, I was making great money, had the beach house, running 2 companies, and that's when I met my brother, Michael Buffer. I found out about him when I saw him on TV. and wondered who this guy was, this James Bond looking character with, really handsome and, traveling the world and doing exciting things in one of my favorite sports, which is boxing, which was the biggest thing happening at the time back in the late 80s when Tyson was coming along. And I thought, what a great job this guy has. But then I was wondering why his last name was named Buffer. And a long story cut short, I found out he was my long-lost half-brother. And I met the half-brother I never knew I had, who I happened to be a fan of before I knew he was my brother. And basically, when we got together after that, it was 4 years later that I realized that I wanted to do what he did, but I wanted to be in that business. And he had never even trademarked the famous 5-word Rumble phrase, let's get ready to rumble properly, and never made a hat or t-shirt. And I came up with an epiphany on a night which I'll never forget. It was November 13th, 1992, when Rick Bull and Evander Holyfield fought for the very first time. I was there. And I went back to my room and incessantly wrote 3 pages of notes of, putting him everywhere in sports and entertainment, not just in the boxing ring, and trademarking the phrase and making video games and toys and movies, all this kind of stuff. And I couldn't stop. It's like one of those movie scenes, where you're just like writing. And, pardon me for talking so much, but I, got with him and I said, listen, Michael, I want to make you richer, more famous than you ever dreamed, myself in the process, hopefully. And, I want to be your manager, direct your career, but I want to be your partner in creating all these avenues of licensing and all this for this thing, but I have to trademark it right. And you know where I got that idea? I got that idea from, remember Pat Riley trademarked three-peat? I don't know if you remember that when the Lakers won like 3 in a row. And
I don't know. I remember that. No.
Well, it's probably, before your generation, shall we say, but he got very well known. It was well written up, three-peat. He's making all this money off it. And I thought, if he can trademark that, then we got to trademark this let's get ready to rumble phrase properly, right? And that was an instigating factor in my decision. So Michael said one thing. He said, how are you going to do it? I said, I really don't know, but I'm going to figure it out. If I'm going to give all this up. I mean, I was making a huge amount of money back in the early 90s. And, again, I could have stayed that way, but I was waking up and going to work. I don't want to wake up and go to work, in essence, mentally. I want to wake up and live a lifestyle, which makes me money. And that was what I chose. So I went and sold both companies, rolled the dice, quit with the money I had in the bank, and had our first product out within a year, Talking Keychain, actually. And many, many other things happened. Put him everywhere, doing everything he does. Made him the most famous sports and entertainment announcer in the world, to which he still is, and a legend. And then the big one hit. I made our first video game, and it just went over the moon from there.
And how did you get connected with the UFC? We see you all over the world because the UFC fights happen everywhere. How did you get introduced to that arena or in that phase of your life?
I've been in martial arts since I was 12. My first sport was judo. And then I went into, we moved from Philadelphia to Malibu when I was 15. And I eventually began meeting people in a style called Tang Soo Do because Chuck Norris was out here teaching a famous actor named Steve McQueen, and who I happened to know because I was best friends with his son. And I was really good friends with Steve for the last 6 years of his life. And it was a great experience as a kid. This is one of the biggest, hugest movie stars in the history of film, even today. And so Chuck Norris' fighting partners, one named Bobby Burbage, was teaching in Malibu, and I went into Tang Soo Do, which I'm a second-degree black belt. And then I went into kickboxing, from my early 20s all the way up to 32, and I was, training incessantly 3-4 times a week, sparring heavily, having little smokers here and there, and just really enjoying it because I love to fight. And so when the UFC came around, I thought, wow, this is it. I mean, I told Michael I wanted to be an announcer, but we agreed I wouldn't do boxing. And I said, that's okay. Something will come along. Right. So I actually employed Michael into the UFC, for UFC 6, 7, and 8. Then we had to stop that contract because of the contract we had with the famous wrestling league called WCW, the Hulk Hogan league back in the 90s. Mm-hmm. And I fought for the job and they wouldn't give it to me. I said, basically, I have media contacts I've built over the years. I will help you build the sport. But it fell on deaf ears. So what do you do when you get said no to? There's a famous speaker named Zig Ziglar, and I do motivational speaking too. I teach branding and marketing to companies, and along with my motivational speeches. And one thing I always tell everybody that it's like what Zig Ziglar says. You've got to get every no brings you closer to a yes. You figure you get 9 no's, eventually that 10th one's going to be a yes. So you fight for the job and you let people know you want the job. And I actually thought of an out-of-the-box way to get it. I managed a fighter named Scott the Pitbull Ferrazzo into UFC 8 in Puerto Rico. And when I went down there with my fighter, I convinced the owner, which was my original plan from the beginning, to let me announce the prelims, which he did. And I thought he did a good job, but they didn't hire me after that. Then they called me 6 months later to go do a show called UFC 10, when I happened to be in the hospital with my mom, and I write about this in my book incessantly. And my mom was recovering from an operation, and I get the call while I'm, bedside with her. And it was like, you ever see Rocky movies? The Stallone Rocky movies, you ever see them?
Oh, yes.
All right, how sometimes his wife, she gets sick, she's in the hospital, she's in a coma, he can't train, he can't fight, his motivation's gone. Mm-hmm. And then she wakes up and says, go win, right? So when I was in the hospital, I got the call, and they said I had to be in Alabama in 3 days. Could I go and do the whole show? And I said, I'm with my mom in the hospital. I can't leave her side. I'm all about my family. My mom looked at me after I hung up the phone, and she raised her thumb in the air. She said, what is that? I think, if it's what I think it is, tell me. And I told her, and she said, you got to go. And I went. And then I did UFC 10, and after that, they didn't hire me. They hired somebody else. So now it's another shot in the face. What do I do?
Wow.
I felt like a girl waiting for a date to the prom. This is going on like a year and a half. So then they called me up and asked me to co-star on Friends as myself with the Ultimate Fighting Championship segment they did. And John McCarthy and Tank Abbott, were in it. And on the set, I told them, I said, look, it's time we make a deal. I'm going to help you build a sport. I'll be passionate about it. I see myself doing it. I'm going to lose money even working with you in the beginning. But I've got to be able to announce every fight and grow with you as an announcer and help you grow the sport. And it was the best poker hand I ever played. As of February 16th of 2016, it'll be 20 years that I've been announcing in the Octagon.
Was the "It's Time" phrase, slogan that you are so well known for, was that what you went in with day one?
Not. Absolutely not. And the reason why is my brother is famous for his trademark "Ready to Rumble" phrase. I had no interest in being what I call Frank Sinatra Jr. I had no interest in being a guy trying to be another guy inside the ring announcing. I wanted to develop my own distinct style and grow with it and build it over time, and I was not phrase driven. That happened organically, and it came about probably 5 years after I was even announcing.
Wow. So it was a 5-year process. I talked to so many people, Bruce, and I'm sure you do too. It's either follow the money or follow their passion. So many people say we've got to have a plan and work the plan, stick to plan. And not that you didn't have that, you certainly did, but you didn't have all of the answers on day one, and it was a process. That's awesome.
It's impossible to have all the answers on day one. It's possible to have a plan. It's possible to have a goal, but it's impossible to have all the answers because you don't know what's going to come up at you. And one thing I'll tell you in business is that all business is the same. It's just the product and the people you deal with that are different. You should apply the same applications of business to it, which for me, it's all about marketing. But to be stoic and think that you know everything, then you're probably setting yourself up for failure. You have to be willing to be open-minded, learn, and adjust.
Yeah, fail faster. I think that's a bad paraphrase of what Watson, founder of IBM, said. If you want to get there faster, fail fast, something like that.
Well, you don't know success until you know failure. You don't know what you are in life until you've been punched in the face. It's bottom line.
Exactly. And for the last minute or so that we have, Bruce, tell me about your book. You said it was an autobiography. It's Time, my 360-degree view of the UFC. What would your life be without the UFC after being there for 20 years?
Oh, I'd be doing other things. I'd be successful in what I do. I'd be in some varied form of business. I just wouldn't have, in other words, I wouldn't know what it's like to be without the UFC if I never had the UFC, right? Mm-hmm. So an adjustment now, when I leave the UFC, it's going to be on my own volition because I'll probably have lost my passion for it if that ever happens. And
it hasn't happened after 20 years?
No, my passion is higher, and I'm traveling more than ever. In the last 5 weeks, I've been in Krakow, Poland, Manila, Montreal, Brazil, Vegas. I just got back from New Orleans. I go to Mexico City next week.
Wow.
I always kid around. This is just, I always wanted to be James Bond when I was a kid. What, in my generation, what kid didn't? Maybe that's true of your generation too.
Heck yeah.
And, traveling the world, suddenly getting the call, well, you got to be in Krakow, you got to be in Manila, you got to be in Tokyo. I mean, I call it traveling the world like James Bond, not having to kill anybody and doing what I love to do. You can't argue with that kind of a point. And I'm sure there's 5,000 or more guys out there that are waiting for me to drop dead in the octagon so they get a shot at my job. And that's fine. I bring it. I love competition. Competition breeds success, and success breeds competition. But that's my office, and I'm very proud and very humble and very honored. Every night I walk in, it's the first night I've ever walked in. I'm like a kid in a candy store, and when I lose that feeling, I won't be able to travel the world 40 weeks a year with the kind of fervor I have, because then, as I mentioned earlier, it's going to be a job. And not that there's nothing wrong with that, right? But I really love what I do, and I want to stay loving what I do. When the passion wanes, and I think I seriously have to consider it's time for me to retire.
You do definitely bring as much energy to the octagon as the fighters do, and it's always fun to watch you perform. I don't know if you would consider it a performance, but it's always fun to watch.
Let me comment on that. And again,
sure.
Don't worry about the time. I've got a few more minutes. I know I'm an announcer, but I really actually consider myself a performer. And that's the way I look at it. When I go out there, I'm performing not just for the fans and the fighters, who are the most important thing at that moment. I'm actually performing for myself and making my family proud. And announcing's great, and that's part of it. But I don't want to be still. I can't just stand still and do it. I've got to move.
Yeah, you sometimes jump and say it's time. Like I said, it's always energizing, and my wife got us into the UFC a couple of years ago. Right. She was more interested in it than I was. And now we I don't know where it was. We were watching it at Buffalo Wild Wings, but it was the fight with Weidman a couple weeks ago. Was that him?
Weidman Cormier.
Yeah, where I don't remember where that fight was, but it's always fun to watch you and the fighters. I think there's some of the maybe there's obviously going to be some exceptions, but I think the sportsmanship inside the UFC is head and shoulders beyond other things that we see on TV. But
well, you're absolutely correct in that, because you have gladiators in the field of honor, getting their blood, sweat, and tears on the line, putting their lives on the line, seriously, literally. And afterwards, when they, like this weekend, when they bow to each other or get on the ground and head to head, bowing and with their heads on the canvas, thanking each other for the great war they just had. You don't see this in other sports. You see some hand slapping, you see some hand shaking, you see a lot of posing, and the reason that the UFC has grown exponentially so huge, one of the key reasons, is the leadership of Dana White and the Fertitta brothers that took it over in 2000. And the great job that they have done that I don't think anybody else in their position could have done as well as they did. But you've got an approachable athlete that when you walk through the lobby of one of the fighter hotels that we're at in the city, and you see me or you see, the other fighters, walking around and stuff, they will stop and give you an autograph. I will stop and take pictures. This is why we're where we're at. Without the fans, we're nothing. And the fans deserve all the attention, especially the young kids. When I was 5 years old, I was with my brother Brian, who was 7, and we were in Philadelphia, and a tall Afro-American man who we recognized from TV, we said hi to, and he talked to us for 5 minutes, treating us like, respected, equals, talking to us. And that man's name at that time was Cassius Clay, who went on to become Muhammad Ali. I never forgot that my entire life. Even today, I think about it, and it gives me happiness to think about it. That was a very motivating factor. I would never want to damage that experience, even as just the announcer for a young child, boy or girl, and it happens all the time. Because in this day and age, we live in a decaying society of morality, and we don't have the role models that we had when I was a kid, that we have today to choose from. I mean, today you have, and pardon me if you're into it or whatever, but, I throw up when I think about the Kardashians and some of the things Miley Cyrus represents. And don't even get me started on Justin Boo. It's like, or Bieber, excuse me. But, it's like, these are not role models to me. Not at all. Ronda Rousey is a role model to me. That's a role model in my sport. and I've been along with some others, but you're hard-fetched to find a lot like there used to be. So our role and our responsibility, as I always say, with greatness comes great responsibility, right? So you need to do more than just fight. I need to do more than just announce. We need to give back. And that's how I look at it.
And before I forget, Bruce, if you want to plead the fifth, and I hope it's an okay question to ask, but watching Ronda Rousey on TV, absolutely incredible fighter. What is she like in person? Is she mean? Is she sweet? What is she like when you meet her and want to shake her hand?
If you're respectful to her and you're nice to her, she's as sweet as pie. And if you're going to be disrespectful to her, she could be as mean as a goat. It's just, we're talking about a person who's real. I'm real. She's real. When you deal with real people, you get real reaction. So all I can tell for your listeners out there that, when I end my podcast, my It's Time podcast, which is a lifestyles podcast, you can subscribe to it at iTunes and SoundCloud. Matter of fact, tomorrow I've got Jean-Claude Van Damme coming in studio for a nice long interview. So I think we're going to throw some kicks together and stuff. It's going to be fun. And I say at the end of the podcast, treat everybody with you the way you want to be treated. Everybody around you. It's like a 3-foot theory. Treat everybody with respect the way you would want to be treated. Show respect, right? Be a good person. Be a role model of your sphere of influence. Have an effect on your sphere of influence by being the best person you can be. I know that might sound a little, stereotypical to some people when they listen to it, but life is so simple. You don't have to reinvent it. You just have to treat it well, and it will treat you well. It's kind of a karmic reaction.
Absolutely. We saw her on Jimmy Fallon, and he was somewhat terrified. She was going to show him the arm bar that wins her so many fights. And to wrap up, Bruce, whenever we see people in the octagon, like you're talking about, just the people being nice to other people, one of the things that struck me about the UFC was two guys or girls get in there for a few minutes and they beat the living crap out of each other and they're bloody, and they'll go over after the bell rings and they'll help the other person up. And you never see that kind of, I don't know if sportsmanship's even the right word or not, but it's powerful, and it speaks very highly of the people who are in charge of everything. And we'll put a link to your podcast. Everything that we've talked about today is at brucebuffer.com. So make sure, if you're listening to this, go check that out.
Yeah, brucebuffer.com. And what you can find there is everything going on, UFC and otherwise. You can also go there for special recordings. I get a lot of requests for weddings, birthdays, graduations, voicemails. All that's there on the special recording page, where you can write to the offices, describe what you want, and they'll give you a pricing for it, which I make very reasonable for everybody. And videos are also allowed, for commercial groups and stuff. And Twitter is at Bruce Buffer, and Instagram is Bruce Buffer UFC. And I try to take you on a path of all these great things that I do, and let you live a little through what I get to do.
Awesome. Well, thanks for your time, Bruce. Have an awesome day, and we look forward to seeing you in the octagon again soon.
Well, I really appreciate it. Thank you very much for the opportunity for the interviews. You just go ahead and keep doing what you do, and you're being a role model yourself, doing what you do, right? So this is what I'm talking about. Keep it up, keep it straight, keep it respectful, and that's what will keep our society strong, because people don't respect people the way they used to. It's a very selfish society we live out there, so I try to combat that by doing what I keep, mentioning to you on this call.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that. And every time I watch a fight, having talked to you, it'll have a special new meaning for me.
Well, I appreciate that very much.
Have a wonderful day.
You too. Take care.
Thanks for tuning in. Sorry about my muffled sound there. Sometimes we just have technical issues, technical difficulties, and we just have to roll with the punches, right? I was here in my studio. I have no idea what happened, but it was a pleasure talking to Bruce. Hopefully you liked that conversation, and if you have not checked out the UFC, if you think, I know my mom would say it's so barbaric or something along those lines, but it is absolutely it's not only entertaining, but it's one of the most inspirational looks at sportsmanship. It was not an exaggeration when I mentioned just seeing two fighters go into the ring and then say good match afterwards, or help the other one up and feel bad whenever there's a penalty and they do something they didn't want to do. It's just a good example of how you can go into any activity, even one so physical and fierce as the Ultimate Fighting Championship, and you can go in with passion and aggression and fierceness, but still play by the rules and still have respect for the other people that you are working with. And it's a great example for all of us. You know, when you're going into business, you're going into your blog, you can partner with people to get you prepared, but on the field of battle, sometimes it's just you one-on-one with somebody else, but then at the end of the day, you can still act like a nice human being. So thanks for listening to this episode. I had fun. Check out brucebuffer.com. Take a look at his book and maybe have him announce some of your events. He's got some teasers there, and they're pretty fun. This episode, again, is sponsored by howtostartamastermind.com. As Bruce mentioned, surrounding yourself with the right people. He partnered with his brother to do some incredible copywriting and work on some great projects. Surrounding yourself with the right people is how you will become successful. So check out howtostartamastermind.com, and you can grab the program that I've been using for the last, I think it's been about 8 to 10 years. So this is another episode of the Empowered Podcast, episode number 88. In fact, I'm your host, Ellery Wells. We'll see you next week.